What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And there's a lot to this story. So rather than starting with the individual on the thumbnail who lost his life March of last year, right? I want to start with the person accused of doing that to him. His name is Jose Serrano. And I say accused, right? He's arrested. There's video footage that supports the allegations. There's a house full of witnesses that are his family members who also supported. But nonetheless, just to be clear, uh, he's still going to court for it, right? So, who is Jose Serrano? He's from 19th in Mission. He's a Southsider. He's like 41 years old now, but he's got kind of a long history, and so I want to get into some of that. Uh, you'll notice, where Richmond has talked a lot about one of the cities up north that has a lot of Southsiders, and it's true, right? There are a lot of Southsiders in Richmond. A lot of that stems from Southsiders in San Francisco. There's a long history of guys from 19th and also from 16th in Mission going up to Richmond. Their families move up to Richmond. The city got to be a very expensive place, and Richmond was a lot cheaper. So there was just a lot of back and forth, right? You got the BART train, so you could just jump on BART, and it's a straight shot back and forth. So yeah, there you'll see in even a lot of indictments of Sureños from San Francisco. You'll see that they have ties to Richmond. The guys that were recently sentenced in the last 19th Street slash 16th Street indictment for a bunch of murders and everything else. I think some of those were out in Richmond. So that's maybe a topic for another video. But that's kind of the origins of Southsiders in Richmond is coming from San Francisco. So, anyways, Jose Serrano, right? Back when he's like 16 in 2000, he gets caught up for poking somebody on a bus. There was a drive by, right? And by then he was already known to be an addict, right? And so he gets in a little bit of trouble, not too much, because then in 2004 he's like 21 and he gets busted hustling at Franklin Square Park, which is right there, like 16th and Bryant, 17th and Bryant, and he's busted with some powder. Right, he gets caught with some powder, and gets convicted of possession with intent to sell. Again, doesn't really do too long because by 2005 he catches this really horrible case, right, in which basically him and a bunch of other folks from 19th Street had taken over this elderly lady's apartment, right? So, and this was kind of all over the news at the time, but Ellen Gutierrez, right? At the time, she's 84 years old. She'd been a widow for like 15 years, and she was in the early stages of dementia. But she had stayed right there on Mission between 18th and 19th for years, right? And was well known in the community. She used to manage the building. If you've ever been on Mission Street or you've seen pictures, and I'm sure other cities have setups like this too, you'll see all kinds of shops, right? There's barber shops and nail spots and tax places and notaries and you could buy shirts, you could buy fruits and vegetables, you could buy anything, on Mission Street, literally. But there's all these different shops. But a lot of them have apartments on top, right? Sort of like 2 stories, 3 stories, even more. And those are really small apartments. The hallways are super small, like skinnier than a San Quentin cell, right? You can't even hardly move. And a lot of people pay there, stay there, and they get kind of expensive, right? Crazy enough. So, anyways, that's where Ellen had been staying, right, forever. And she was outside a lot. That is the 19th Street Southsiders neighborhood. So they kind of befriended her. And I guess as her dementia set in, they sort of convinced her that she was one of the homegirls from the neighborhood and basically just took over her little second floor apartment. And by then she wasn't managing the building anymore because the dementia had kind of got the best of her. So somebody else was kind of overseeing it. And she got a lot of county assistance, right? They brought her meals. Social workers went to kind of go check on her. She was in all the programs. And there was dozens and dozens of calls to the police about what was going on there, right? Neighbors were calling and saying, hey, man, there's all these gang members in the hallway. There's drug use. There's drug dealing. The cops show up. There's nobody there, right? Social workers would go there and say, hey, something doesn't seem right. Like her place is kind of dirty. She doesn't seem to want to let us in. A lot of times cops wouldn't even respond to that. They tell other levels of county agencies, hey, you might want to go check on this lady. At one point, the people that deliver the food got jammed up by some twacked out, gang members that were there, talking about, hey man, this food is nasty. You need to bring better food. So they stopped bringing food. So there was a lot of opportunities, and she wound up filing a lawsuit, like $1 million lawsuit or something. I don't know. I couldn't find out what happened to it. Probably settled, and it's crazy because she was already old and had dementia even worse by then. So I don't know who actually got the money, um, but she wound up suing the county, right, for dropping the ball, and it's true they did drop the ball. Um, and so nonetheless, he gets busted there. A bunch of people get busted in the apartment, like 5 or 6 people. A couple young ladies who said that they were there being her caretakers, but she wasn't really cared after. And there's like 19th Street, Monster and all sort of stuff all over the walls, all kinds of dope pipes and everything else. And Jose Serrano gets caught there. At the time, he's 22, and he gets busted in a bathroom with a banger and some drugs. Again, doesn't really get any time. So he's back out on the streets. In 2007, he gets busted again at Franklin Square Park, right? This time he's got 19 rocks on him. A cop saw him doing what he believed were transactions. He's got a banger on him, and he's got a glass pipe, right? With a little bit of powder residue and a whole lot of that go fast in there. So he gets busted for that. Well, in come the feds, right? And the feds step in, I think because he probably was on the radar for the whole taking over the house thing. 19th Street has been indicted multiple times, right? The 19th Street South Side of San Francisco get indicted all the time. Normally, how it used to work was like they would be indicted, the 19th Street / 16th Street guys, and then MS would sort of take over, right? And then MS would wind up getting indicted, and that would leave space for the Southsiders to take over. And it was like this back and forth dance. And same thing in Richmond, right? They both had a lot of ties to Richmond. But nonetheless, the feds take over, and they use all those prior state cases that he got, that he just got a slap on the wrist for. They use those as priors, right? Prior bad acts, the stabbing, the involvement in the drive-by way back, right? The getting busted with the powder at the park, a couple years earlier, the whole house thing. And they hit him with 17 years. And the only reason he didn't get more was he wasn't found guilty on the gun violations, right? The proving that the guns had crossed state lines, and there's all these standards to catch a gun case for the feds, right? But they had him on the distribution and everything else. So he gets 17 years, and away he goes to the feds. He paroles in December of last year. Now, his family has had a presence in Richmond for a long time. When he was going to court for this Fed case, his sister, Paula Cardenas, actually came in and testified and said, oh yeah, I see my brother with a glass pipe like that all the time using drugs. I've never known him to sell it. His uncle comes in and says, hey, I own the Serrano Bakery in Richmond over there on 23rd, and he works with me over there sometimes to make money, and I think he uses that money to go buy drugs. So in other words, he doesn't have to sell them. Now that's relevant because that same Paula Cardenas has lived at this house on 36th Street, where on March 27th at like 5 something in the morning, here comes Jose, probably twacked out of his mind, is my guess, right? I don't think he was necessarily sober. He comes to the house, it's his family home, right? That same sister that spoke up for him when he was going to court, that's her address, that's the family house. He pulls up over there, and he's strapped, and he's looking for a younger relative of his. He runs across 20-year-old Antjuan Webb Jr. from Oakland, who's the guy in the picture, and blows him away, right? Ends his life and says, because these people are infiltrating my family. That's his claim at the time, right? So nonetheless, he's in court, and we'll see how that goes for him. Probably won't ever get out. Now, Antjuan Webb Jr., like I said, he's from Oakland. His dad, Antjuan Webb Sr., is really involved with like ministry circles and the faith community in Oakland and beyond. I think we've actually crossed paths before, though I don't really know him. I'm putting a GoFundMe link that he has posted in the description of the video. to kind of help offset the expenses of having to bury the young man, right? And he has a huge family, right? Tons of brothers and sisters and dad. So hard loss, right? Hard loss, obviously, and of course the racial component is getting attention, and I found it kind of interesting. Uh, the narrative of Southsiders having issues with blacks has been around forever, right? And there's been real violence between those communities down south, but it's been for the most part down south. Southsiders from the Bay Area grow up around, the black community just like Northerners from the Bay Area do, right? Like it's generally the same spots. So they're influenced by the same culture and everything else. So you don't see a lot of tension like Southsider versus black tension in the Bay Area the way that you will see sometimes down south. And I'm wondering if this person, right, Jose, was influenced by his prison time, maybe, or just paranoia and he was on dope and lost his mind. I don't know, because growing up in the Mission District and in Richmond, that's not a normal reaction, right, to black folks, period. Um, but I also have noticed that in certain parts of the Bay Area where it was a largely black population and there was some raza there and everything was pretty cool, as that has become largely Mexican and Central American, right? And the black community is a lot smaller in those areas. There does tend to be some racial tension, right? And so you do see that a bit in Richmond, because Richmond was like a well-known, black city basically in the Bay Area for a long time. It's got a long history of poverty, but also a strong black community that is now mostly raza and mostly Southsiders. But something similar happened in East Palo Alto, where East Palo Alto is widely known as a black community for a very long time, a long rich history, right? That is now, well, prior to social media and gentrification, but when I was living out there, was largely a brown city, right? A lot of Mexicans, some Central Americans, right? Mostly Mexicans. And there would be some black and brown tension down there with Northerners, right? And so I don't know, it's like shifting dynamic, I guess, populations. But I wanted to point out this book, and I'll do a review of it. But an excellent book, right? Divide and Conquer by Robert Weedy. He's a professor down south, but he's from the neighborhood, right? From the Southsider community, should we say. And he looked at and talked to tons and tons of affiliated people, right? Blacks that are affiliated down south with various blood and crip hoods, and then Southsiders from down south affiliated with various hoods. And had a lot of conversations with them about race and that kind of stuff and the tension. And based on that book and kind of, people's responses and the conversation in there, this looks like something that would be more likely to happen in Southern California. But I don't want to leave it on that note, okay? Because also what he talks about is in 2019, how Florencia and East Coast, right, the East Coast Crips, were able to really bring about peace themselves, right, with some face-to-face sit downs in the community, and there had been some incidents after that, that got squashed, and real progress was made, not just in these groups can now move freely, right, where they were at war for decades and decades, but also some old relationships are being repaired, right? Folks that went to school together before they got caught up in the gang stuff and the hood wars are now able to sit back and have conversations and reminisce and maintain that friendship or reignite that friendship, since the hood issues aren't there. So there's definitely progress being made with black and brown relations in different places. But nonetheless, here's a tragic example of an individual who just couldn't have it, right? Couldn't let it go. And it's crazy to think that in 2024, and like I said, in the Bay Area in 2024, that we still see stuff like this. But it is what it is. Help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. I don't mean it is what it is as like to dismiss the tragedy of this young man dying. Let me just be clear. Um, but I think there's actually progress being made, more than what this case would suggest. I don't think this is the norm. Uh, but but for the families involved, it's nonetheless a tragedy. All right, you guys take care.